Welcome to my channel. Please click like, share, and subscribe. Let's get into Motown Chronicles, Diana Ross, Part 2. Florence once claimed that the trouble started when Diana slid over to her and tugged on the long full wig she was wearing. I told her, "Don't do it again," she claimed, and then she ran over to Barry and told him that I was trying to start something. They were acting like spoiled little children, two of the most famous and important figures in music history, and this is what it had come to. Flo was pregnant with twins. She would have the babies premature just days after this party. And she had had one can of beer too many. She and Diana exchanged words. The more antagonistic Florence became, the more troublesome Diana proved to be. And bitch, you stop coming over here and bothering me, Flo shouted, her speech now slurred. Diana went over to Barry and angrily whispered something in his ear. Barry then went to Florence and told her that she would have to leave the party since she wasn't invited in the first place. "I ain't going nowhere," was Flo's answer. Barry turned away and walked back to Diana's side. Florence remembered that she was chatting with Fuller Gordy when Barry came back to her and threatened, "If you don't get the hell out of here, I will have you thrown out." "Nobody tells me when to leave a party," Florence snapped back. She looked over Barry's shoulder and directed her loud comment to Diana, who turned away. Eventually, Mary and Florence were both being ejected from the party by Barry's beefy bodyguards. Florence, defiant and angry. Mary, humiliated and in tears. "No one told you to bring her, Mary," Barry Gordy hollered after them. "And don't bring her back." It was the last time Barry would see Florence. He did not attend her funeral. Instead, he sent a floral arrangement with the cryptic message, "Goodbye, Flo." As the battery of news reporters, television cameramen, and photographers documented the whole scene, Diana was hurried into the new Bethel Baptist Church ahead of everyone else. Stevie Wonder, the Four Tops, Mary Wilson, and other Motown stars, ballad family members and friends, all stood with their mouths open as the bodyguards elbowed everyone out of the way and spirited the star inside. Diana did not try to slip anonymously into the church and sit with her own mother, Ernestine, and with Mary Wilson and all of the other mourners who were not family. Rather, Diana chose to make a spectacular entrance. She sat in the first pew, reserved for the deceased's immediate family, right next to Florence's grieving mother and husband, Tommy Chapman. She couldn't have been any more conspicuous. One Detroiter observed, "Look at how she's showboating, trying to upstage Florence at her own funeral." "Be quiet! Sit down and be quiet!" shouted Reverend C. L. Franklin, singer Aretha Franklin's father. It was becoming impossible to control the 2,200 people inside the church, some of whom came to pay tribute to Florence, but most of whom came to see what was left of the Supremes, Diana Ross and Mary Wilson. People were hanging from the balcony, taking snapshots. "The stars have asked us to ask you not to take pictures of them in the church," said one of the deacons from the pulpit. Diana looked satisfied. Her eyes were moist and her head bowed. As she held one of Florence's young daughters on her lap, Diana adjusted the yellow bow in the child's hair. Photographs of her holding Florence's child would appear in all of the newspapers the next day. The services were ruined by pandemonium. 30 uniformed policemen tried to keep the 5,000 fans outside the church from trampling one another, while inside, Reverend Franklin tried to maintain order. The press ran up and down the center aisle, snapping photographs of the star who sat in the first row. "At least have some respect for the dead," Reverend Franklin said to the photographers. Toward the end of her life, Florence Ballard lost it all, even self-respect. In January 1975, Diana was in Rome starring in a glamorous movie titled Mahogany about life in the fast lane as a fashion designer. While Diana rode around in chauffeur-driven limousines in Rome, Florence was taking the bus around Detroit. The first time she had to use public transportation, she waited at the bus stop feeling self-conscious, all the while praying that no one would recognize her. She remembered later that to ensure her anonymity, she wore large sunglasses and raised the hood on her winter coat. When automobiles would slow down at the intersection to allow for crossing pedestrians, Florence, certain they were slowing down to stare at her, would turn her back in shame. Finally, Flo recalled the bus pulled up to the curb and she got on while rummaging through her purse. A few seconds later, she got off. She didn't have exact change for the fare. Florence walked across the street to a run-down liquor store and politely asked for change of $1. The person at the cash register sized her up and began asking, "Say, aren't you?" "No, I ain't," Florence said, cutting him off. Then she went back to the bus stop and sat on the bench. Finally, another bus pulled up. After Florence Ballard got aboard, it drove off in the direction of Detroit's Brewster Projects. The Reverend called it the homecoming of Florence Ballard as he eulogized her. We have experiences that are not always good, sometimes frustrating and crushing, but positive good grows out of negative situations. It was an unusually warm winter day and well over 90 degrees inside the overcrowded church. Cardboard fans were the only source of relief. A woman passed out in the back, and her husband carried her away. Florence's mother, Lurley Ballard, fanned herself frantically, eyeing Diana Ross suspiciously at her left. Flo's husband to her right. A heart attack had claimed Lurley's daughter Florence at the age of 32. Flo still had some unfinished business with Diana. She simply couldn't understand Diana's mercurial behavior, why she did the things she did. The night before she died, Flo asked a friend, why did Diane have to act that way? Suddenly after the eulogy, Diana stood up. The noisy crowd hushed for the first time, and then everyone began to whisper as she made her way to the altar. "Could I have the microphone, please?" she asked. Someone handed her one. "Mary and I would like to have a silent prayer," she announced. Wilson, wearing a jewel-studded cap and veil and black fur coat, looked horrified by Diana's announcement. She said later that she didn't want to join Diana in any silent prayer, but by now had no choice. She was helped up to the altar and stood near a blue and white heart-shaped arrangement of carnations with a ribbon that read, "I love you, Blondie, Diana." As flashbulbs popped all around them, Mary stood beside Diana. The two gazed into the silver-blue casket. Florence wore a light blue choir robe and matching slippers. Her face looked bloated. Mary wept quietly. "I believe that nothing disappears, and Flo will always be with us," Diana said. Without looking at her, she handed the microphone to Mary. "I loved her very much," Mary barely managed to say. She and Diana didn't speak to each other, but the two of them reached out and touched Florence's face, then turned away. "I could have killed Diane for calling me up there," Mary would say later. "How dare she turn that service into a show? How dare she?" Softly, the organist began to play the recessional hymn, "Someday We'll Be Together." When Diana left the Supremes, she went on to become a solo recording artist and movie star, while Mary went on to try to pick up the pieces of the broken group. Florence wound up having to get on welfare. In the years immediately following Florence's dismissal from the Supremes, Diana had no communication with her. Mary kept in touch via an occasional postcard sent from the road. Both women had their own problems and interests. But when Diana heard the news in late 1974 that Florence was about to lose her house on Buena Vista Avenue in Detroit, she was genuinely shocked. Diana knew how much Florence had depended on the security of her modest house for peace of mind. "If our fame doesn't last and we have nothing else to show for it," Flo had said when she made it big, "at least we'll always have these houses." She decorated hers in Wedgwood blue, white, and gold with velvet draperies, brocade furniture, and tinted crystal chandeliers. This was her only sanctuary from what she perceived as the cold, cruel world. "I thought she had at least made provisions for the house," Diana told a friend. History has painted the picture of Diana Ross's total indifference to Florence Ballard's plight. Certainly, many of the people at Ballard's funeral believed that Diana was not only to blame for the former Supreme's downfall, but somehow even planned it. Perhaps Diana could have done more for Florence, but the truth is that even though Florence's plight was widely publicized, all of the Motown artists who had bragged over the years of being a family turned their backs on her. Diana felt that for Florence to lose her house because she owed a few $1,000s on it was a shame. She couldn't imagine how Flo could let this happen to herself. Apparently, Diana tried to communicate with her, but either Flo refused to return her phone calls, or the calls were intercepted by her family because the two women made no contact. Diana had her business office issue a check for the amount owed on the Buena Vista home and then began making arrangements for the money to be delivered to Florence's estranged husband, Tommy Chapman. Tommy became suspicious. Diana had never tried to help Florence before, and now he thought that she had ulterior motives for wanting to save the home. He insisted that the check be made payable to him personally. But Diana didn't trust Chapman. She was uncertain about his relationship with Florence at this point and why the two separated. Rather than risk him absconding with the money, she insisted that the check be made payable to the bank holding the mortgage. Diana felt that Chapman would allow her to do this favor her way if he really had his wife's best interest at heart. When he wouldn't, and she couldn't reach Florence, the check was voided. Florence lost the house and had to move herself and her 3 young children in with one of her sisters. She received $135 every 2 weeks from welfare. It's not known whether Florence realized what Diana had tried to do. If I'd have known how it was going to end with Florence, maybe I would have taken more time with her, fought her more, even though she didn't want my help, Diana would later say. But she got to be a pain in the ass. She got to be a pain in the ass, and I said, "Oh, forget it. Maybe I should have slapped her face a few times." Mary Wilson must have known what Diana had tried to do, but she apparently decided not to write about it when she penned her memoirs in 1986, Dream Girl, My Life as a Supreme. Today, after Mary's book, Ross and Wilson no longer speak to each other. They didn't speak that morning in Detroit either, at Florence's funeral. Outside the church, the squad of police officers now numbered nearly 50, but it was impossible to control the crowd. When the floral arrangements were being carried from the church, the crowd began tearing them apart one by one. A funeral home attendant tried to keep people from grabbing the flowers, but soon he gave up, and whole arrangements were tossed into the crowds. Fans desperately grabbed bits and pieces, while Diana, head still bowed, was rushed into her limousine. The car sped off. Florence was buried in Detroit Memorial Park later that day. There were no photographers, no intrusive members of the press, no exciting fans, and no Diana Ross. Just family members and a few friends, including the Four Tops. As the family gathered close to the graveside and the casket was being lowered into the frozen ground, Mary Wilson stood off to the side and cried. It was, by this time, late in the afternoon. The sun was setting and it was getting cold. Mary drew her coat closer to her as she stepped towards the open grave. Shivering, she threw a single red rose onto the coffin. Later, Mary would remember looking for Diana, hoping that she would appear. But Diana never did. To this day, the two have not discussed Flo's death or the funeral. Diana Ross and Florence Ballard started out as youngsters from the same government-subsidized housing project in Detroit, both with so much hope and promise. But their lives took such totally different paths. One so glorious, one so sad. Who knows what twists of fate made Diana Ross a star and Florence Ballard a tragic figure. Florence was always on a totally negative trip, Diana would say in an interview 4 months after the funeral. She wanted to be a victim. Then when she left the Supremes and the money stopped coming in, it really messed up her head. She was just one of those people you want to grab and shake and yell, "Get your effing life together." If you like these readings, please let me know. Please respond, and I will continue to do them, and I will continue to drop them. There's a lot of interesting things that I found, and I'm very anxious to share it with you guys. Peace and love.